Hello, I'm Mike Vinsel. Today we're going to continue reading my book, Travels with Nobody. Today we're going to do chapter 7. So that starts on page 93. So here we go. Okay, chapter 7. B-52 over Petrified Forest. The car was running smoothly enough, no strange sounds, but it definitely felt like it was losing power. It didn't seem like there was a headwind. The land ahead appeared flat to me, but with the gas pedal floored, I could only make 60 miles per hour tops. Perhaps it would go below 60. Sometimes it would go below 60. I certainly hoped it would not break down. I didn't know the first thing about working on cars. The image in my mind of what to expect if the car did indeed break down had been shaped by stories, surely exaggerated, I figured, of mechanics who might take advantage of the desperate circumstances of a breakdown that a breakdown would present. I knew it would probably be fine. I hoped it would be fine, anyway. I was driving through sagebrush land. Far off both to the north and to the south, I could see red rock plateaus. A sign let me know that the next exit would lead to the Petrified Forest. I decided to keep going toward Flagstaff. The land stretched on for miles and miles. Hardly a house or any sign of humans, let alone a town. It must have been around 4 in the afternoon when I was driving, radio silence, listening for any out of the ordinary sound from the car as it struggled to maintain 60. There was no unusual sound. Then I detected a sound, weak at first, a dull, humming, low sound. It was getting louder. It wasn't rhythmic. It was a constant sound, getting louder, low-pitched. Was it something wrong with the wheel bearing or the tires? The tires would make a rhythmic sound. The car felt as smooth as ever. The sound was getting much louder now and getting louder quickly. What in the hell was this sound? Within a few seconds it had become deafening. It became high-pitched, a deafening roar. I looked in the rear view to see if there was smoke. Then, just as the sound was almost breaking my eardrums, I saw thin, dark smoke in the rear view. But it didn't look like it was coming from my car. It was coming from the sky and getting very close. The roar was incredibly loud. I thought the car was going to explode. Then I saw it. A B-52 roared overhead, not more than 30 feet above my car. It came from above and behind, just when it had passed me. No, it came from above and behind, and just when it had passed me, it roared back up skyward, leaving me to drive in a cloud of black jet exhaust. The B-52 crew buzzed me. Well, that was a thrill. They must have been practicing flying and had seen my car all alone on that empty stretch of road and decided to have a little fun. I was relieved that it wasn't anything wrong with my car, but as it got dark, I noticed that my passenger side headlight was not working. I thought about it and realized that I had never changed a car headlight bulb. I would have to figure that out. That night, I made it to Flagstaff and got a motel room. Off the interstate, driving through downtown Flagstaff was interesting. I saw the big statue of a lumberjack. Paul Bunyan? I remember having seen that in Easy Rider. That was it. I had never thought of Arizona as timber country, but I could see that this seemed much more like Colorado than my image of what Arizona was. This was the Rocky Mountains, not grapefruit country. I guessed that there must be a big difference between northern and southern Arizona. I found a motel on one of the main streets. I got a room and went out walking and found a bar where there was a country music band playing. I went in. I forget what night it was. There were several groups of customers, but it wasn't crowded. I was able to sit at a booth. I don't know why, but I didn't stay long. I remember going back to the hotel after just 1 or 2 beers. At this point, sitting by the pond, working on a picture, I'm thinking about why I am doing this. Why am I trying to dig back in my memory to that time? It was a long time ago. It was long ago. I still remember most of it in pretty good detail. It was not a particularly remarkable trip. There were no crazy adventures other than just seeing the country. The crisis behind this story is not from back then. It is from nowadays. Here, me, 57 years old, living in Japan, I suppose I am trying to define my identity. I recognize that the problem of how we define ourselves is starting to have an impact on my life here in Japan. When I was 20 years old, working at the apple orchard, on the advice of Pete Malm, I read Walden by Henry David Thoreau. At the beginning of that, he wrote that he would require of all men to write an honest account of their lives. I guess I'm trying to make an honest account of my life, to explain the things I did and why I did them. I am just Stephen Stroh. That is my identity. I am American. I was born in the United States. I grew up there. I have an American passport. I'm lucky enough to have permanent residency in Japan, something for which I am thankful. But I don't think of myself as Stephen Stroh the American. I'm just Stephen Stroh. My wife, Fusako, is Japanese. She was born in Japan. We met in Taiwan more than 20 years ago. She was in Taiwan because her grandfather was from Taiwan. The story, as she told it to me, is that her grandfather was in the Japanese Imperial Navy during World War II. I don't know if he was drafted or if he joined voluntarily. My father joined the American Navy in 1943, the same year as Fusako's grandfather had entered the Japanese Navy. Fusako told me that there was a time when his ship had been attacked by American planes. It had been damaged, but not sunk, and had made its way to Japan, I think Sasebo, to be repaired. Apparently, in the time that the ship was being repaired, the war ended. So this young man, 18 or 19 years old, found himself in Japan, unable to speak Japanese, having recently been discharged from the Navy. I don't know the circumstances by which it came to be, but he did not return to Taiwan. Fusako told me that after leaving the Navy, her grandfather had found work as a menial laborer, working alongside prisoners on work crews in Japan, first cleaning up Tokyo of war damage, and later doing hard labor in the construction of Tokyo's subway system. And later, he worked in the construction of a dam in the mountains of Gifu Prefecture. He was not a prisoner himself, but many of the people on his work crew were. They were criminals, not prisoners of war. That is apparently what happened to Fusako's grandfather. He did not have an easy time of it here in Japan. The Chinese characters of his name were commonly pronounced Kunihiro in Japanese. I met him in Taiwan before Fusako and I got married. Her parents, mother's side grandparents, and her aunt and uncle all came to Taiwan to meet me. Fusako's future husband. That had been a big family event. She was the first of the grandchildren to get married. Kunihiro was in his mid-70s, but was already showing the signs of emphysema, of which he would die just 3 years later. Fusako had made arrangements for us to all visit Kunihiro's youngest sister, the only of his 10 siblings still living at the time, at her home just north of Taipei. just a second here. Fusako had made arrangements for us to all visit Kunihiro's youngest sister, the only of his 10 siblings still living at the time, at her home just north of Taipei, where we were treated to a tremendous feast. We also all went to get Chinese foot massages. As we walked the streets of Taipei, we each took turns carrying Kunihiro piggyback. I remember that. He was small and frail enough that even his daughter, Fusako's mother, could carry him that way. That's me in the corner. Some years after I had graduated from the University of New Hampshire, yes, I successfully did that. People talk of the 5-year plan. I used to brag, exaggerating, that I did it on the 25-year plan. A few years after graduating, I enrolled in the teacher certification program at Keene State College. I had planned to become a high school teacher somewhere in New England. When one night I was at a party at a house where I had once lived in Durham, New Hampshire, where the university is located. There was a woman at the party who said she was living in Taiwan at the time and was just visiting New Hampshire on vacation from her English teaching job. I told her that sounded very interesting to me. I knew some people who had taught English in Japan and even in Laos. I told her that. I told her that I wanted to be a teacher and that I would like to get some experience teaching English overseas somewhere before I committed to teaching in the States. I introduced myself. She said her name was Connie Smith. She told me that if I was serious, I should get a plane ticket and fly to Taiwan as soon as I could. She told me that they had a vacancy opening up at their apartment in Taipei because 2 of her housemates were moving out. She said that if I was serious, I had a place to stay. I remember mentioning that I would need to line up a job first. Then she stopped me. She told me not to get a job before I went. If I did, I would end up with a lousy deal. The best way, she said, which proved true, was to just go to Boston to the Taipei Economic and Trade Office, their de facto consulate, and get a tourist visa. It was free and good for 60 days. Just don't mention work, she said at once. No, don't mention work. She said that once in Taipei, there will be plenty of under-the-table work for far better pay than going about it the legitimate way. Within a week, I landed at Chiang Kai-shek International Airport. Connie told me to take a bus to the domestic airport in Taipei. From there, it would be a short taxi ride to the apartment. I went down the escalator to the exit. Once outside the doors, I was met by heat like I had never experienced in my life. It must have been 100 degrees and humid, and it was night. I found the domestic airport bus and got on. The bus ride to Taipei took almost 2 hours. And here's a painting. This would be the Shilin Night Market just north of Taipei, and that's very nearby where Fusako's aunt lives. So anyway, okay. All right. Okay. The scenery outside was spellbinding. Chinese characters in blinking neon, tiled roofs with corners curving to the sky, black silhouettes of palm trees, a temple illuminated on a hilltop. Fantastic, too ornate for description. I remember stopping at a toll booth on the highway and seeing a group of soldiers standing around, smoking, rifles slung over their shoulders. Why would they be at a toll booth? I wondered. We arrived at the domestic airport, and I called the phone number. Connie told me to wait outside by the taxi stand. Soon she arrived in a taxi to take me to my new home in Taipei. We drove for about 10 minutes, and then she told the driver to stop. It was a busy street, Scooters zooming by in the hundreds, some with families of 5 clinging to Daddy as he wove through the wild, noisy nighttime traffic. Connie paid the driver. So once on the sidewalk, I thought that we'd had the misfortune of being dropped off where there might be, perhaps, a leaking sewer pipe. Connie saw my expression and laughed. That's not what you think it is. It's food. It's what the vendor is selling, she said, indicating the vendor's stall among the several. What is it? I asked, incredulous. Chou tofu in Chinese. It's fried rotten tofu, a national delicacy. You want some? She said, chuckling. I told her I would pass on that for the time being. We bought several big bottles of Taiwan Pijiu. That's Taiwan beer in Chinese. I met my new flatmates, a guy from New Hampshire named Dave Lewis, 2 Korean girls, Coco and Seong. They were the 2 girls who would be moving out at the end of the month. They were studying Chinese language at Taipei National Normal University. I remember thinking, Normal University, as opposed to? Anyway, Coco and Seong spoke English fluently. Connie and Dave Lewis were both about 10 years younger than me. I was 36 years old. We all stayed up drinking beer and talking until around midnight. So just a second, I'm going to have some coffee here. In the morning, I was alone. Connie and Dave had both gone to their English teaching jobs, Coco and Seong to their classes. My task for the day was to find a job. So I went outside. I backtracked to the convenience store up the street. I was going to get a newspaper to check the classified ads. Before I even got to the convenience store, a black Mercedes pulled over. The driver got out, ran up to me, and asked in broken English if I was an English teacher. I told him I was. He gave me his business card, and we made an appointment to meet that afternoon for an interview at his private school. The interview turned out not to be an interview at all. I was already hired. When I arrived, I was told to fill in the time slots on the calendar that I was available to teach. The students would be adults. I signed up for several slots and started that night. I would be paid on Fridays in cash. I forget the exchange rate between the US dollar and the NT dollar, that's New Taiwan dollar, the Taiwanese currency, but it worked out to be about $20 US per 50-minute class. Better than the construction job I'd been working before I left the States. So that's how I got to Taipei. That job was good for what it was, but the guy with the Mercedes was less than honest. The pay was always less than I'd calculated, and he always had some contrived excuse for that. But it gave me the time to look for a better job, which I soon got. That was at Shanghai Commercial Bank. I became the private English tutor of several senior vice presidents of the bank, all men in their 60s. I would give private lessons in their plush offices and be transported by company limousine to my next appointments at other branch offices around the city. That was a wonderful job. At the end of June, Seong and Coco moved out, and I got a room of my own. After they had moved out, they had a party at their new place, and I was invited. That is where I met Fusako. The day after the party, a group of us went to Fulong Beach in northeastern Taiwan. That was the day I fell in love with Fusako. We got married the following January in Nagoya, Japan, her hometown. Connie didn't get along with Coco, and so did not go to the beach with us. It was Dave Lewis, Seong, Coco, Fusako, and two other guys whose names I don't remember, one Canadian and the other Japanese, and me. I remember getting off the train at Fulong. We walked through the town, the narrow road lined with vending stalls selling everything from straw hats to steamed buns to beer. The sun seared, the air dense and hot. A thermometer on a bank read 40 degrees. That's about 104, I remember calculating. I bought a straw sombrero. It didn't look like a typical Taiwanese conical straw hat. It looked Mexican. I read on the tag that it was made in Argentina. It was about 3 feet wide, perfect for a day at a tropical beach. So we made our way through the throng toward the beach. A river ran through the town, and we crossed it on a bridge. The river water was the color of coffee with milk. We followed a trail to the beach. We found a spot to put down our blankets. Looking to the sea, we could see the turquoise water of the East China Sea beyond a sandbar. Before the sandbar, the brown river water mixed with the seawater. We would have to swim through that to get to the beautiful water beyond. That did not seem to bother the girls. The guys, me included, were more squeamish. But none of us said anything about it. Just behind our spot, where the beach grass and shrubs meet the sand, was a concrete pillbox. Was it a relic from the Second World War, or was it meant to be used in case of invasion from mainland China? I did not know, but I pitied whoever might have to man that post in an attack. We had prepared a cooler with food and beer. The girls had brought big, leathery, dried squid to eat. I had seen those hanging from shops and had assumed that they were eaten by old people and with weather-worn, parched faces, people who must have had to eat them in poorer times, for whom they would be a kind of soul food. But here these girls were, fresh-faced, stripped down to their bathing suits, demure, beautiful, chewing the legs off the squids, enjoying them thoroughly. I had bought skewers of fried chicken at the train station. Then it came time to swim. We all waded out into the brown river water, wading, walking until it was too deep and we had to swim. I dog paddled in the shade of the sombrero. We reached the sandbar. On the other side of the sandbar, the water was beautiful, clear and warm. We swam out together and treaded water when it got over our heads. Treading water, looking back at the land, was an otherworldly experience for me. 2 weeks before, I had been working as a laborer in the construction of a new library at the University of New Hampshire. In the years since I graduated, I had drifted from job to job. A sawmill, helping a friend on a welding project. After a couple years, I had decided that the best thing to do with my life would be to teach. I enrolled in the teacher certification program at Keene State College in Keene, New Hampshire. It was a one-year program which, upon completion, I would be qualified to apply for teaching certification in several states. That had been my plan. I wanted to teach in New England somewhere, but after completing the program, I hesitated. I had moved back to the seacoast area of New Hampshire, where I still had friends from my college days. Construction had just begun on a new library at the university, so I applied for work as a laborer. I had lots of construction experience from over the years. I told myself that I wanted to work on the library out of a sense of duty to the university, that in future years I wanted to be able to look back and say that I helped build that library. But that wasn't really the reason. I was afraid to commit to teaching. I was afraid I would prove to be incompetent. I was a good construction worker and had just been offered a full-time position with the company building the library. I was 36 and knew I had to make a decision. I didn't want to do construction for the rest of my life. I wanted to teach. The invitation to Taiwan dropped out of the heavens just in time, deus ex machina in my life. There I was, treading water in the East China Sea, looking at Taiwan. Even the shape of the land was different from anything I had known. Jungle-clad hills in the distance, unnaturally steep, not like the graceful curves of an Appalachian skyline. To my left was a Taoist temple, so ornate that it seemed overdone, like an amusement park attraction. But it was real. To the left of the temple, a concrete jetty led out perhaps 100 yards into the sea, protecting a ferry landing on the other side. To the right was a long footbridge leading from the town over another larger river to the main beach. The one we would have to pay, to the main beach, the one we would have to pay, the one we would have had to pay money to go to. An unending parade of parasols marched across its span, one line coming, the other going, like leaf-cutter ants on a fallen tree. The buildings of the town, gray concrete, with dark tropical mildew stain betraying age. I had the sense that it was a place where time moved slowly, that it has always been this way. Indeed, the Lonely Planet Guide had said that if you wanted to see the real old-time China, you had to go to Taiwan, that the ancient temples and historic buildings of the past had been destroyed on the mainland during the Cultural Revolution. I didn't know. This was my first time in Asia at all, and it was beautiful. Seong, Coco, and Fusako were beautiful, laughing, frolicking in the water. We went back to the sandbar, sat in the sunshine for a while, and went back in the water again. I was treading water when Fusako swam toward me, dog paddling too. "Wo de pifu shai hela," she said. I had taken Chinese at the University of New Hampshire 10 years earlier and tried to put the words together. Wo in Chinese is me, or I in English. Wo de is my. Pifu is skin. Shy. I didn't know that one, but hei means black or dark. La at the end of the sentence puts it in the past tense. I thought I had just about got it when she said in English, "My skin become dark," pointing to the sun. Oh, she's getting sunburned. I gave her the sombrero. She dipped her head in thanks, saying "xie xie," and put it on and dog paddled away. That was when I felt the first spark. At the end of the day, feeling the kind of tired you feel after spending a day at the beach, we walked back up through the town to the main depot. Before we got close, the procession became a crowd. There was just one more train going back to Taipei. It would arrive in about half an hour. We thought we had been early enough, but it seemed that everybody had had the same idea. What would we do if we couldn't get on the last train? Well, we all, even I, had places we had to be in the morning. We tried to keep our group together in the bustle. Loud announcements in Chinese blared over loudspeakers. Seong, Coco, and Fusako could understand them. The train arrived. Those who had reserved tickets were let aboard. Soon the train was full, but there were hundreds like us who had non-reserved tickets, but tickets nonetheless. People shouted at the train staff. There was an announcement. The train backed up and disappeared around a curve. People stood on the platform, concerned looks all around. For me, it was all quite an adventure. Seong explained that they were going to put more cars on the train. It would be back shortly. That was interesting. I wouldn't have known they could do that. Excuse me. I wondered if this day had been different from any other summer Sunday. Was this unusually busy? I didn't know. Soon the train re-emerged from around the bend. We saw the same line of sleek, shiny passenger cars. Then behind them was a line of 10 or more boxcars. Boxcars with their sliding doors open. An announcement explained that those who needed to get back to Taipei, who were willing to, could climb aboard the boxcars. We did. Most people did. We had to help some people climb up into the cars. The floors had been covered with cardboard from shipping boxes, cleaner than the oily floors would have been. We piled in and sat together on our cardboard mat, Fusako next to me. A conductor signaled to the driver to go. The train whistled and lurched into motion. The doors were kept open. I sat in the middle, wary not to fall out. The sun was setting as we rolled out of Fulong. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. We passed through jungle, then clusters of houses right up to the edge of the tracks, then through a tunnel. Blackness in the tunnel, the rhythmic clickety-clack unchanging. Then we emerged into the pink light of sunset, bathing a most curious-looking hillside. It was a terraced town of miniature houses, ornate with gardens of flowers, spires of stone, tiled roofs with gable ends curling to the sky. Seong said that it was a cemetery. Once the sun set, darkness came on quickly, not like the lingering sunsets of more northerly latitudes. I could see the black outline of the hills against the sky. Now and then an illuminated hilltop temple. I could see inside the windows of homes, red lights aglow, the lights of family altars, casting their light on statuettes of the many gods of their religion, Seong explained. I sat entranced. I had really done it. I was in Taiwan. I had made a decision in my life, and here I was. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. The people sprawled on the cardboard mats, however they could, to make themselves comfortable. Soon I was the only one awake. Fusako had nodded off too, and with the gentle shaking of the train, had settled more and more against my shoulder. I didn't mind. There was something about her. She was beautiful, but that wasn't it. It was something else. We went over a bridge over a wide river, high above the water. The railroad bridge had no railings, just a set of tracks high over the water. Looking down to the black abyss of the river was scary. There was no handle, nothing to hold on to, but nothing would happen. I saw the reflection of the lights of the houses on the far bank, the red light twinkling on the river in the night, Fusako's head on my shoulder. Okay, now I have a picture of this. This is the view from the inside of the boxcar, and that would be me in the corner there, and looking out over the river as we cross the bridge in Taiwan. Okay. I knew I should not fantasize about what might be happening, but I let my imagination run with it for a few minutes, and it was wonderful. I stopped my imagination from going too far. I would never have tried anything, but I remember another thought entering my mind, that the woman sleeping on your shoulder, Stephen Stroh, is going to be your wife. I knew that was a crazy thought and stuffed it back to where it came from. Nothing like that was happening. I knew that. I was sitting with my knees under my chin, my towel as padding. Fusako, still sleeping, was beginning to drool on my shoulder. Then she stirred, realized what she'd done, and snapped awake to apologize. I told her not to worry about it and gave her the towel. She stayed awake after that. She hardly spoke English. I only spoke English. We sat looking out the boxcar door, the boxcar door without talking, just looking. Then we arrived at the bustle of Taipei Station. Throngs of people, deafening announcements in Chinese, and a wall of stifling heat. We all said our goodbyes and left for our homes. That was the day I fell in love with Fusako. Over the next few weeks, thoughts of her followed me through the days and nights. I knew there was no chance. We didn't have a common language. We had not said even a sentence to each other. I thought I was losing my mind, that I was becoming a stalker, obsessed. But my intentions were good. I was not a bad man, I told myself, but I realized that every stalker, every obsessed man thinks his intentions are good. At least, that's what I told myself. The same group, Fusako too, went hiking in the mountains just north of Taipei a couple weeks later, and I went. After that, Fusako allowed me to go with her to visit her relatives in Shilin. We sat and drank tiny cups of oolong tea with several of her uncles. They were friendly to me, even though I could hardly say a word to them. It was several days after that I decided to call her. Coco had given me the phone number. At the time, Fusako rented a room near Chiang Kai-shek Memorial, a giant mausoleum with a great park-like area that is a popular spot for taking walks in the evening. I used an English-Chinese dictionary to painstakingly compose what I would say to her over the phone. Then I called. After reading out the script over the phone, Fusako responded, "Wo yao." She sounded enthusiastic. "Wo yao." It took me a few seconds. It translates to "I want," which meant yes. She wanted to go. Then it got difficult, as I had not prepared beyond that. But somehow we arranged a time. I would stop by her place, and we would go. I remember that walk. We walked up the massive steps of the mausoleum. By day, it is a somber place. Soldiers in dress blue uniforms with silver helmets stand sentinel. Faces stern, expressionless, solemn. But at night, it becomes the most romantic spot in the city. Couples lean against the marble railings of the walkways that ring the structure, each spaced a few yards apart to get what privacy they could, kissing in rapture. I had not known it was like that and didn't want Fusako to think that I had planned that, so we went back and walked among the illuminated flower beds and ponds. We knelt beside a pond. It was beautiful, the illuminated red pillars of the opera house reflecting on the water. I was trying to tell her about my land in Vermont. I had bought 12 acres for a fishing camp a few years before. I was trying to tell her and trying to ask about where she comes from in Japan, but I just didn't know enough Chinese. I didn't know any Japanese at all. I remember saying in English that I wished I could speak Chinese or Japanese because there was so much I wanted to tell her, and I wanted to know about her. That I was frustrated with myself for that. She stood calmly behind me, put her hand on my shoulder, and said, "Man man lai," which means, "Take your time, there's no hurry." After that, it seemed we spent all of our free time together. We loved going out to the night markets and restaurants. In Taiwan, going out to restaurants was no more expensive than cooking at home, so we went out almost every night. We couldn't talk much, but we got along very well. Her program at the university ended that September. She and several of her classmates went on a trip to Thailand for a week. One afternoon while she was gone, I went to the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial by myself. I just wanted to sit on the steps, watch the sunset, and think. A group of women asked me where I was from. They spoke English. I told them, and they were from the Philippines. They asked me if I had a girlfriend. Many people had asked me if I had a girlfriend while I was in Taiwan. I told them that I did, but that I was worried. I wondered if it would be possible for it to work out, because We couldn't talk to each other. They laughed. "Don't be silly," they told me. "You don't need to talk," they said, shaking their heads, laughing. I suppose they were right. I did not need to worry about that. Sometime after Fusako returned from Thailand, we were in my room, sitting on the bed, looking out at the Sheraton Twin Towers Hotel. That was the view from my room. Fusako took my hands in hers and looked at me and said, "Ni shi wo de shansheng." It took me a few seconds. "Wo shi ni de tai tai," she added. I knew that shansheng was husband, tai tai was wife. Fusako was not asking, she was telling me that I would be her husband and she would be my wife. In October, Fusako's parents, her mother's side grandparents, uncle and aunt all came to Taiwan to meet the man who would marry Fusako. I was nervous because that is a solemn event in any culture, and I wanted to make a good impression. I guess I did okay. The following January, I flew to Japan and we got married. My brother Matthew flew out to be at the wedding. After we were married, we moved to the States. I would be a teacher. We moved to Western Massachusetts. That was close enough to visit my father and friends in New Hampshire, but cosmopolitan enough for Fusako to have opportunities to study English. I got a job teaching history and English composition at an ALPS program, that is an alternative learning program for children with disabilities. In my case, behavioral problems. Kids who had misbehaved in their mainstream classes one too many times and had landed themselves in our program. I loved the job. I felt that I understood some of what my students had faced. It was not easy, but the pride I felt at the end of the school year, the pride I felt when, at the end of the school year, my seniors would successfully graduate made it all worth it for me. The problem was the pay. The salary was not enough to live on. I had to get a part-time job in the evenings to make ends meet. I found work as a counselor at a privately run mental health care facility. On weekdays, I would get home from teaching at about 3 in the afternoon. My job at the mental health care facility started at 4 o'clock and went until 11 o'clock. Then I would go home and sleep until I had to get up to do my lesson planning. I often had to work at the mental health facility on weekends as well. Fusako enrolled in several sets of English classes, one with a group called the Center for New Americans, another class at the public library, and she enrolled in English classes meant to prepare students to get a GED. She met many people in the classes, and her English improved quickly. One of her classmates in the GED program was in a wheelchair. One day in class, he explained in English, his native tongue was Spanish, that the reason for him being in a wheelchair was that he had been in a gang and had been shot in the spine. We were barely able to pay our rent and my student loan payments. We never went out to restaurants. On Saturday nights, we would allow ourselves the luxury of a 6-pack of Hamm's beer, which cost $2.45. We would mix up a batch of filling and a big ball of dough for the wrappers, and we'd make gyoza, Chinese dumplings. We would make about 100 of them, freeze most, and cook up the last ones. We would eat the gyoza and drink the beer. Those are fond memories now, but at the time we were both full of worry. We could not afford medical insurance. It wasn't that we just chose not to buy it. We really didn't have enough money. 6 months after we moved to Massachusetts, Fusako got up the nerve to apply for a job at a bakery. I went with her to for the interview. She was nervous, making her English worse than it actually was. But the owner of the bakery decided to take a chance on Fusako. He figured it would be rough at first, but she would learn what she needed to learn. He was right. She did. We would get up and I would drive her to work. Work started at 4:30 a.m. She would get out in the afternoon. We lived that way for 2.5 years. Then one day, when I came home from teaching, Fusako was on our bed crying. She had held herself together for those years, but she knew it was never going to get better. She asked if we could move to Japan. I said that we could. I would teach English. Being married to Fusako, I would be allowed to start my own school. That was many years ago now, and that brings the story to the present. To me, 57 years old, having lived in Nagoya, Japan, where Fusako grew up for almost 20 years. Here, sitting by the pond, thinking. Having grown up in New Hampshire, and me being me, my hobbies were camping and fishing, fly tying, whittling fishing lures, all the little things that go with fishing. I found peace and comfort outdoors, finding solitude in the woods. In Nagoya, there was no solitude to be found outdoors. I'm sure it would have been worse in Tokyo or Osaka, but Nagoya was difficult enough for me to adjust to, so relentlessly urban. I went through the common phases of culture shock that people go through. I remember a time when I was not able to sleep. Fusako was working at a call center at the time from 4 to 8 in the morning. One morning she left for work. I was alone. One morning she left for work. I was alone. The first graying of the sky hinted that the dawn would come within the hour. I decided to go outside. There was a footbridge over the little river nearby. I thought it would be nice to watch the carp in the river as the sun came up. Even at that early hour, there was a constant procession of black-suited, briefcase-toting men crossing the bridge to get to the subway. No solitude at all. I must have looked distraught and hoped nobody who knew me would go by. My heart raced. I had to go back to our apartment before anybody I knew saw me. Inside our apartment was the only place where I would find solitude. I realized that I was going to have to throw away the whole identity I knew and learn a whole new way of living. Fusako tried to make me happy. On weekends, we'd take trains to the mountains where we hiked among waterfalls and beautiful scenery. It was indeed beautiful, but we had to make such arrangements in advance, and the train fare was sometimes 10,000 yen, $100, for the two of us to take those trips. I knew I had to adapt for her sake. After I had given up trying to find ways to do the things I liked to do, things started to get better. After a year or two, we began to make enough money that we could go out to restaurants. That is something that is much better in Japan than I had experienced in the States. After about 5 years, I had adapted. Fusako and I had a decent life. We even became regulars at a sushi restaurant that we loved. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 7. So that's page 116. And so I'll see you next time. We'll do chapter 8. Okay.